It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by Electrify America. Electric cars, they're normal now. Learn more at normalnow.com. Electric cars may seem a little different, but new technology always seems weird at first. Even podcasts seemed weird when they first came out in the early 2000s, and now everyone listens to them. You're listening to one right now, and just like podcasts, electric cars are normal now. They have longer ranges, faster charging times, and now multiple models to choose from like sedans, SUVs, and even motorcycles, so you can find one that fits your life. Electric cars, they're normal now. Learn more at normalnow.com.
This is the Locked On Auburn podcast, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast, presented by Fetch Me Home Delivery. Now, I met the folks at Fetch Me the other day. They came on my morning show on News Talk WANI, Auburn Opelika this morning. Good folks. They've got a real passion for helping Auburn students because the guy who started it, he kind of had that vision when he got this thing going. He was in school and kind of delivering in between classes. So if you're a student listening and you kind of want an easy, flexible part-time gig, they are an awesome company to work for. And also, if you're hungry or want anything delivered to you, if you just got home from a long day and you want your dry cleaning picked up or your groceries picked up, or, of course, your family meal delivered in less than 40 minutes, be sure to visit the folks at Fetch Me. I cannot recommend them enough. Their service is second to none. Go to their website at fetchmedelivery.com or use promo code, and you can use promo code FetchMe20, FetchMe20 for your first delivery free. Also, an outstanding app. Just search Fetch Me or Fetch Me Auburn, Fetch Me Opelika. It should all come up. And use promo code FetchMe20, FetchMe20 for your first delivery free. All right, today's show, I'm solo again, so we're going to do some more Locked On Auburn voicemail questions. A lot of feedback yesterday in regards to what's the issue. Is it Gus Malzahn? Is it the scheme? Is it the execution? And I think there's been a lot of good conversation on Twitter, a lot of good voicemails that we're about to touch on. And, so let's jump into that. You can call the Locked On Auburn podcast voicemail machine. Once again, I said this yesterday, I need your help this week because my boy Michael is out of town. So 205-502-4285. All right, let's start off with the classic.
Hey, guys.
And let's roll into it.
Hey, Zach. Love the show. Have a question. Is Gus Malzahn a good recruiter of quarterbacks? Not taking anything away from Bo Nix. Bo Nix, I think, will come into his own.
Okay.
The difference between an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old. You compare we're as Auburn fans comparing against Tua or Jalen Hurts. Also, so is Gus Malzahn a good recruiter of quarterbacks? I think that Bo Nix will come into his own as he gets older, and not take anything away from the kid. I think he is a competitor, but is he a good recruiter of quarterbacks? Thanks for listening.
All right, so appreciate the call. Really, really appreciate that. Good question. So, one, I think Malzahn's a good recruiter from top to bottom. I don't think you really have to look at any position outside of offensive line. I mean, his offensive line recruitment process over the past 2 or 3 years has been pretty bad. And that's kind of why Auburn's in this situation, and they're starting a bunch of older guys. And next year there's a question mark at 4 of the 5 positions. I think center is tied up with Brahms. But as far as him recruiting quarterbacks, I mean, Joey Gatewood was a sought-after guy. Everybody wanted Jarrett Stidham. Not a lot of folks wanted Nick Marshall, but a lot of folks wanted Jeremy Johnson. Sean White was, an Elite 11 guy. And Bo Nix was one of the most decorated high school quarterbacks in the country a year ago. So I think so. I think he is a good recruiter of quarterbacks. And he's got guys coming up that are 4-star guys that I think want to play, or a lot of programs want guys like them to play for their program on Saturdays and lead their offenses. I think Malzahn's not only is he a good recruiter, I think he's a great recruiter at quarterback because he's been able to identify the guys that he wants, and he's been able to go after them and get them. And you look at the guys that he's lost out on. He was in the running for Kellen Mond back when he was at IMG, then he moved back home to Texas for his senior year, and obviously he picked Texas A&M over Auburn. And he had Auburn stuff in his pictures on Twitter for forever, and then he changed them. And then I'm trying to think, Justin Fields. I don't know if Auburn was ever really legitimately in that after Justin Fields decommitted from Penn State, then went to Georgia, and then he wasn't. They weren't in the conversation when he was transferring, but I guess maybe Auburn was in Justin Fields' top 3, maybe top 5. I read several different reports, but it never really felt like he was legitimately in the race for that. So it seems like when he gets the quarterbacks that he wants on campus, they commit. So I do think he's a good quarterback recruiter. The other part of that you talked about regarding Bo Nix, I think the Bo Nix situation is fascinating because one thing I want to make sure that people understand about Bo Nix, and I'm not big on the he's a true freshman thing. I mean, if you win the job in a Power 5 program like Auburn, I don't think you get that excuse. It's either you play well or you don't. And so looking ahead, there's one thing that I believe that Bo Nix does better than anybody else is he forgets. And what I mean by that is he'll have a terrible outing or a terrible drive or a terrible play, and he still has that swagger. You can tell on his face he's still determined. He's still a gamer. He's still going to play his butt off for his guys blocking up front and his guys making plays. And he's not a guy that's looking to blame other people. He has that accountability. He takes advantage of it. And so, is there a difference between a freshman and then, a junior? And I know you mentioned the voicemail 18 and 22. I don't think he's going to be playing at Auburn when he's at 22 because I think he's going to take a pretty big step regardless of what happens in the coaching position. So that's an interesting question, an interesting observation, and I appreciate your call.
This episode is brought to you by Electrify America. Electric cars, they're normal now. Learn more at normalnow.com. Electric cars may seem a little different, but new technology always seems weird at first. Just think of podcasts. They were weird when they first came out in the early 2000s. They were actually called audio blogs, and you had to download them onto MP3 players, and now people all over the world listen to podcasts all the time. Just like podcasts, electric cars are normal now. They have longer ranges, meaning they're not just for work commutes. You can take an electric vehicle to your weekend getaway and even on longer road trips. They have faster recharging times, so you don't have to wait around all day for your car to charge. There are more models to choose from. There's sedans, SUVs, luxury vehicles, and even motorcycles, so you can find one that fits your life. With more affordable models and less routine maintenance, they may actually help you save some money. Electric cars, they're normal now. Learn more at normalnow.com.
Your team.
Greetings, 12 Locked On Seahawks podcast.
Who dat family, and welcome into this week's Locked On Saints.
Hello to all you Foxborough faithful, Locked On Patriots.
Every day.
Another Victory Monday.
It's officially Throwback Tuesday.
Crossover Wednesday episode.
Thursday Night Football.
It is Red Friday edition.
When it comes to the biggest stories.
And so the Chiefs' news story of today is, unfortunately, at this point in the season, it is continuing to be injuries.
You need to be locked on.
We've touched about it on this show and all over Twitter and all that.
And all of a sudden we have a great football team with a championship defense, a franchise quarterback, a running game that can't be stopped. This is exactly why we watch football.
Good quarterbacks are maximized in good systems, and that's exactly what we're seeing with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers this season.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Apple Podcast app.
Google Podcasts.
Spotify.
Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Looking ahead to another voicemail. Let's see, who do we got next? We got Warden.
Hey, guys, it's Warden. I tried to leave a voicemail a minute ago, but something came up. So if you decide to play it, play this
We're just using this one, man.
First off, like I said before, which people would be hearing for the first time, please give thoughts and prayers to the family and the families over there from the drive. A lot of us that listen to this, listen to the lunch break and the drive as well, and
right.
A lot of us are as heartbroken and devastated as I'm sure that a lot of you guys are. So there's that. I try to shorten the rest of it up. I think the issue is scheme, not coach. I think Gus Malzahn has done an immeasurable amount of good for Auburn, both on and off the field. And I think that firing him would be a slap in the face of would be the biggest slap in the face you could possibly give someone that essentially has brought your program to national relevance in a lot of ways. Yeah, he averages 5 losses a year since 2015, but he's guaranteed us a bowl. He's guaranteed us that our players aren't going to be in and out of Lee County Jail. I haven't heard a Tiger Walk being equated to the Tiger Walk being the traveling of our team from the Lee County Jail to Jordan-Hare Stadium in probably 3 or 4 years now. I think what he needs to do is he needs to go find him someone that runs an offense similar to him with a quarterback-friendly passing scheme, and just turn the offense completely over to them. He doesn't want to do that, and he's going to have to swallow his pride and do that, because I've got friends that are Bama fans that aren't afraid to admit that if he could have done that a long time ago and molded the offense kind of like what Saban's done up there or what Coach O has done down in Baton Rouge, if he would do that with the players that we've had since he's been here, we could have won 2 national championships and competed a lot more closely with Alabama and now Georgia and LSU. So if he could go get him a Chad Morris or a quote-unquote Joe Brady to come in and take a look at the offense and not overhaul everything and just make it a more quarterback-friendly passing scheme, especially the way that Bo looks like he's more comfortable in passing for 30-plus times a game, even in games that we're winning, I think that we'll have a lot of success, and Auburn could definitely take that next step. But anyway, War Eagle guys, hope you guys are doing well, and podcast is still fantastic.
Thank you so much, Warden. Appreciate the call and appreciate all your feedback on Twitter as well. I think you've shot us a few emails as well, so thank you for that, Warden. Yeah, you mentioned the passing of Chuck Furlow. He's been on this show before. It's been a while, but he's been on this show before. And like you said, folks, listen to this. Also listen to the drive and the lunch break. He was actually supposed to host with Painter on the lunch break yesterday. Before we obviously we found out that. So that's why I was on the lunch break with Painter yesterday. And Bill Cameron did a great job remembering Chuck on the drive yesterday. And it's just it's a sad time around here. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. In the studio I'm recording in, behind me there are pictures of on the wall of all of our talent, and his picture's still up there. It's tough. So thank you for mentioning that, Warden. Thank you. Yeah. So you talk about how Malzahn has done a lot for the program. I don't think there's any doubt about it. You mentioned the 5 losses a season. If you factor in bowl games into that average, it changes it a little bit. And it just kind of depends on if you win or not, if fans that year care about the bowl game. Because a lot of times they're like, who cares about the Birmingham Bowl? Who cares about the Chick-fil-A Bowl, against UCF? Because Auburn just missed the playoffs. Who cares about the Outback Bowl against Wisconsin? Folks that say that don't seem to care until they lose. So I think that's worth noting there as far as, averaging 5 losses a year. Yeah, I think a lot of Auburn folks appreciate the type of player that he's brought in. I like that you mentioned that. As far as him taking a step back on offense, I don't disagree with you. But can he do it? I don't think he can. And, I don't know if it's a pride thing. But my question is then, what's his value if he does step back? The quote-unquote offensive genius who has a team that has one of the best defenses in the country and an offense that can't move the football, against an average or a slightly above average defense. And that's an issue. And so then if your offensive genius brings in a guy like a Chad Morris, I would love that hire, by the way. But if he brings a guy in like that and says, okay, Chad, you have full autonomy, you have full control of the offense, I wonder how folks would respond to that. I think there'd be some people that are all for it. Hey, good on Gus. But I think there'd be some people who'd be like, well, what's his value? And to those people asking that question, I think the argument is he has hired outstanding people. I mean, his support staff, the assistant coaches, they're solid. They are solid players, and I don't think they're solid coaches, excuse me. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
This is Vinny Iyer, host of Locked On Fantasy Football, with your Locked On Fantasy Football Edge of the Day. It was a slow start for the Jets offense under Adam Gase early in the season, but they found their groove the past 2 weeks with Sam Darnold and Le'Veon Bell. Look for them to keep it up in the final few weeks of the fantasy football regular season with matchups against the Raiders, Bengals, and Dolphins. Not only do they make for solid plays in seasonal formats, they should have plenty of appeal going forward in DFS as Gase is suddenly pushing all the right buttons with his skilled personnel. Get the edge in your fantasy football league every day by listening to Locked On Fantasy Football on your preferred podcast provider.
Your team.
Okay, let's get it. Locked On LSU, your team every day.
Welcome back in to Locked On Bama.
You're going to hear about it all week long on Locked On Buckeyes.
Every day.
Monday through Friday.
When it comes to the biggest stories.
Everybody's talking, and we're not excluded from the mix.
Everything that you could want from a post-game recap, we're going to do.
They're far and away the number one team in the country. Winning at this point is the only thing that matters. It's going to put you in meaningful games later.
You need to be locked on.
Tua is the best of us. He is an incredible kid, immensely talented, and it's such a shame that his fairy tale ending was actually at the beginning.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
In the Apple Podcast app.
Google Podcasts.
Spotify.
Hit us up with those 5 stars, and we're going to be here 5 days a week. 1 star for every day of the week.
Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
If you want to hear more shows like this, well, just go to LockedOnPodcasts.com.
And then looking ahead, let's see. We've got one more voicemail, and this is the best I could get out of it. So if this was you, please call back. I'd really like to hear what you have to say because I think it sounds interesting. But all I could get out of it was you think Auburn's going to win the Iron Bowl and something about Tua. I just want to play it so you know that I'm not ignoring your voicemail.
I think Auburn's going to dominate against Alabama.
Dominate against Alabama.
For 2 reasons. One,
2 reasons.
as we all know, Tua Tagovailoa is
I hear
out
Tua.
this week and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so that's all I got. So please call back and try that again. I'd really appreciate to hear that take because I think folks would love to hear other folks explain why Auburn is going to dominate Alabama. That'd be fun. If you're listening to this show, you would definitely enjoy it if that happened. I mean, because the closest version we've seen of Auburn dominating Alabama in my lifetime that I can remember, my conscious memory, was 2 years ago. And Auburn only won by 12, despite Jarrett Stidham fumbling in the red zone. I think Auburn could have won by more scores than that. But that's really the closest thing that we've seen to that. All right, so you can email the show at lockedonauburn@gmail.com. Chris did. Let's see. So Chris says, so people just assume that the Iron Bowl is an easy win based on Bama's defense and Tua being out. I think Shane called into the lunch break and said essentially that Gus should win that game, and if he doesn't, he just doesn't know what we should do. Yes, Shane did say that yesterday. I remember that. Have these people forgotten that Bama's receivers haven't been injured and are 100%? I'd feel better about the game if they were the ones out with 100% Tua in the game, if I'm being honest. I'm hoping Auburn comes out and goes full, quote, YOLO ball, what I refer to our 2-minute offense we sometimes shift into. Win or lose, Gus has to show something positive against Alabama, or I'm concerned that he's forced out or put out in a more impossible, if that's even a possibility, but higher-ups or forced out altogether, which I think hurts the program more than anything. Keep on killing it on the show, and War Eagle. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your question. It's an interesting dynamic with Tua not being in the game, because the bottom line is it makes this game more winnable, and we can debate if it's better for Alabama to have Tua or their 3 incredible future NFL receivers. I think it all goes back to the quarterback. I mean, they've had talented receivers in the past. They haven't had 3 this talented at the same time. But Tua's a special player. I don't think there's anything about it. And the reason this is such a big deal nationally is because I think the NFL was expecting him to be the first player selected in the NFL draft this year. So I think Tua going down is a big deal. But I get your point as far as, if you had Tua without those receivers, it would do a lot of damage for sure. But this is an interesting situation because with Tua not playing and you get him at home, there is so much pressure on Gus Malzahn to win this Iron Bowl. I think you could argue there's more pressure on this Iron Bowl than any Iron Bowl that Gus Malzahn has had since being at Auburn. Because, I mean, even 2013, when Auburn probably had its statistical best chance to win, maybe 2017, but, I mean, you look at 2013 and 2017, in my opinion, I think Auburn was able to play so well because, one, they were at home, and two, they were kind of playing with house money. I mean, in 2013, we thought we were all happy with the Ricardo situation, and we had no idea what was going to happen that night. And then in 2017, most Auburn fans had already thrown in the towel because of that loss to LSU, and then Malzahn comes out to his press conference following that game and says, "That's going to be all right. It's not that big of a deal. It's going to be all right. It's all going to work out." And then he wins and wins and wins, beats Georgia. And then you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, he's got a chance against Alabama. Wouldn't it be great if he pulled this out? So I think the pressure here is at an all-time high for Gus Malzahn, despite playing a team that is in a vulnerable state and more beatable than it has been in previous years. I mean, think about it. If you can name an Iron Bowl that has more pressure on it since Malzahn has been a head coach, because I think 2010 had a ton of pressure. You're on the road, you're in Bryant-Denny, and especially at halftime when you're down by so much, when he was an offensive coordinator. Sure. But as a head coach during his time at Auburn, I can't think of a time where there has been more pressure on Gus Malzahn. And, as I'm kind of doing this rant, I can't think of more pressure on any game. Can you think of one? Let me know. Call into the show. Email us at lockedonauburn@gmail.com or give us a call, 205-502-4285. I mean, this Iron Bowl coming up, and part of me wants to say that I hate that we're skipping over Samford here, but it's the Iron Bowl. It deserves 2 weeks of coverage. I'm having a hard time thinking of a game that has more pressure on it than this Iron Bowl coming up. I mean, we're talking about if Malzahn gets ran out, I mean, on the scoreboard, he could be ran out of a job. And that changes the trajectory of this program for forever, good or bad. It just kind of depends on what happens. But it's going to be fascinating to see. It's going to be fascinating to follow. Malzahn spoke with the media yesterday and really said a whole lot of nothing. He did say that you got to score more points than your opponent to win. That's something worth holding on to. And he also said the new goal for the season was to win 10 games. So beat Samford, beat Alabama, and then win your bowl game, which is weird that he had to say it, but it's probably a good thing that he said it. Just because I think everything that people say or speculate with Gus Malzahn is, I think a lot of it's unfair. Some of it's justified, but I think a decent amount of it's unfair. But we'll see. And if they go 10-3 with a bowl win and a win over Alabama, I think at the start of the year, if you would have said that, I think you would have taken it. And especially when you look at the college football playoff rankings last night, they are ready to put Alabama in. They want to put Alabama in. Because if LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, Georgia's out and Alabama's in. Now, I think an interesting scenario happens if Georgia beats LSU. Is LSU still in because they beat Alabama head-to-head? Time of loss is important, but what's more important? Losing late, or, if it's a toss-up between LSU and Alabama and Oregon, it'll be interesting to see which one comes in at number 4. But it'll be fun to see. I'm about wrapped up, but Painter, what are your thoughts on Malzahn? Malzahn made the statement, the new goal yesterday for the rest of the season is for Auburn to go 10-3 and winning a bowl game. You mentioned on the lunch break that we on the show yesterday that you thought it was pretty important that he made that statement.
People will go back and forth about its relevance. You pointed out, hey, shouldn't that have been the implied goal anyway? At this point, like if you're not going to win your conference, at least you try to get to double digits. It's double-digit win, something that Auburn hadn't had a lot of success doing since the 80s. They'll do it occasionally, but not back-to-back double-win season, double-digit win season. So I think it's good for a number of reasons. I think in terms of PR, you're trying to set a defined and attainable goal. 10 wins is both a difficult goal to get to every year, as Auburn can attest to, as it rarely gets there.
Right.
The other part of that is that if you're Coach Gus Malzahn, you're saying, look, I acknowledge that we didn't get to the SEC championship, which essentially eliminates us from the playoff, which are going to be your major goals every year.
Yeah.
But now here's something we can do. We can beat 2 top 10 teams in 1 year. We can finish in the top 15, maybe even the top 10 with a bowl win, like he mentions. And then you get to that elusive double-digit win season. I think it's a good move. It's something saying, look, this is our goal. This is what we're pursuing. And also, it's not been done a lot.
And then the element of you get to mess up your arch rival's season, because the committee has been instructed to not let injuries affect where you're ranked in the college football playoff ranking. So Alabama coming in just outside of the top 4. And my thing is, I think with LSU and Georgia, I think LSU wins that game. So that forces Georgia out. And I think they're ready to slide Alabama up to number 4.
It's possible. Look, my thing is I'm not even thinking about it so much as the playoffs, although that's the bigger part of the conversation.
Sure.
If there were an important Auburn player injured in this game, the national narrative, the narrative coming out of the Paul Feinbaum show would not be, oh, Auburn, what a bummer. Their quarterback or their running back. When Kerryon Johnson was injured in the Georgia game, people didn't really care in the 2017 national. So, look, Alabama fans are doing this thing where they're downplaying the game. They're conceding it a loss. That way, if they lose, they'll say, yeah, well, we didn't have our star quarterback, so, I mean, what can you expect, really, man? And then if they win, they'll go, we're so much better than you, even without our best player.
Sure. No, you're right. I mean, so they're trying to put themselves in a win-win situation.
It's BS is what it is, because you can't have a team. It's not BS in that they have probably one of the 3, maybe one of the 2 most talented players in college football on their team, and he's not going to play. So it's like, yeah, that sucks. That's a big advantage for Auburn. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Get over it. Kerryon Johnson wasn't healthy. Auburn, no one cared.
You're right.
It's part of the game. Like he's been hurt now for 2 straight seasons. They recruit better than just about anyone in the country. You could argue maybe Georgia, Ohio State, whatever. Look,
do you think it's an Alabama thing, or do you think it's I know you mentioned Kerryon Johnson. There's some similarities there. There's some things that aren't comparable. But I get the point that you're making. But how much of it has to do with the fact that Tua may have been the number 1 pick in the draft?
Well, it's a little different than Kerryon in that his value is so great. Kerryon was a good player, but he was a second-round running back.
Still the SEC Offensive Player of the Year.
And so not trying to downplay this, because like you get the debate going back and forth about how much Auburn needs a run game. Right. It's like when they didn't have a running quarterback in 2017, they had a really good running back, and that was one of the best offenses Gus Malzahn's had. But yeah, the quarterback position has taken on an entire new life over the last 10 or 15 years. It is so important for a number of reasons. And on top of Tua just being a phenomenal player that could have been the first person taken in the next draft, he's also a good leader and like a guy you want out there, and he's got a lot of experience now. So I'm not downplaying the fact that they lost one of the 3 best players in college football. What I am saying is not my problem is Alabama fans saying, well, we don't have our best player, so we could never win this game. It's like you guys bang your chest all season about how you out-recruit everyone, and it's generally true.
Sure.
If that's the case, your 4-star, whatever Mac Jones was coming in, ought to be able to game manage just fine.
Yeah.
Like if Kyle Trask could do it, save me. Mac Jones can figure it out.
Yeah, he's got better receivers than anybody to throw to in the country right now. So we'll see. Follow Painter on Twitter at Paint Sharpless. You can listen to him every day. There's been a few questions referencing calls from the lunch break. So you can hear all of that fresh and live on the lunch break. He and Justin Ferguson do a great job on ESPN 106.7 and online at ESPNAU.com. You guys also podcast it. Thank you so much for chiming in for a second, bud. I appreciate it.
Sorry to slide in late.
No, you're good, man. You're good. We all got stuff to do. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow. Be sure to tune in. Follow me on Twitter at @ZBlackerby. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Auburn. This has been the Locked On Auburn podcast.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.